said to myself when I checked the account balance on my phone for the third time since getting home. I told you it was legit, man.
Sounds lit, dude.
He shied at me while I sat on the couch staring at my phone.
But I don't know.
He took a puff of the joint he'd lit after we'd sat down. It was obvious now. Between the immaculate interiors of the building and the $4,000 check, they were legit. Of course, being legit meant they were actually going to implant something in my head, though. You're in the telepathy project, too. In response, Harold tapped the back of his head between his skull and neck. No need to worry, man. It's not actually brain surgery. The thing's about the size of a quarter with a couple of tiny wires. They install it just under the cerebellum. Cerebellum? When did the high school dropout learn anything? Harold's smile faltered for a second. He smiled again before and went into the realm of annoyance. Hey, I guess I actually paid attention for once. That little falter was odd for Harold. But now that he wasn't broke all the time, maybe he finally had some self-esteem and wouldn't take the friendly put-downs as much. Or maybe I was just being too much of a hassle. Either way, I shrugged off the odd look he had given me for half a second. Looking back on it now, I should have seen that as the first sign of something being wrong. But I'm an idiot sometimes, and I choose to forget about it. Our conversation didn't go much of anywhere, and after another hour or two, Harold left me and about a gram of the excellent weed that he had brought with him. It was 4 o'clock. I was tired from going through all the testing and having to wake up at 7 a.m., but it was much too late to take a nap. The car shop was glad to hear that they finally started working on my car. My backed up cell phone bill got
As
paid,
creepy as you wanted to get, I guess.
my first payment on my credit card in nearly 6 months. And the night was pretty uneventful.
Bro, my dad bought Target
Besides catching
cookies.
up on episodes of the
These things
latest
are
Marvel
insane.
Netflix TV show. I tried to catch a couple of Z's, but was really woken up by a phone call at 7 a.m. Hello? I said groggily.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Hello, Mr. Pinsky. I'm calling from
So, I'm gonna pause it real quick to catch you up. Basically, it's like this medical trial thing. This seems really sketch. And he has to do like a bunch of medical exams, and then they have to put something in his head and stuff. And run trials. And it's all under like some kind of new medical business. So, right now I think he's about to get the implant and whatnot. And so the doctors are trying to talk to him and stuff, so yeah, that's where we are.
I sat up, suddenly feeling awake despite the 5 hours of sleep I had gotten. Oh, hi, what's up? I'm calling to schedule your surgery. That's quick. You guys don't waste time. The person on the other side of the phone laughed. Time is money, Richard. We are a company that makes profit. We have a spot later in the week and one for later in the afternoon today if you're not busy. Today? Why would they want to do it so quickly? And the answer came to me almost as soon as I asked it. And they didn't have anybody else to study. They found something rare that they needed and they didn't want to waste time when they finally had the thing they needed. It was nice to feel valuable for once in my life. Mr. Pinsky, are you there? Yeah, sorry. How long will the surgery be? We can't guarantee the recovery time, but it's usually an hour or two before you can go home. The implant doesn't require general anesthesia, and it doesn't go deep, so it's installed in just a couple of stitches and some mild painkillers.
I'm at the restroom while you listen. Well, I'm gonna pause it too, so that way I don't miss any of it, because this was interesting. I'll be right back. this creepy pasta.
How's later today then?
Bro, let me show you the actual image of this, like, thing. Here, look. Cancel. Look at this thing. Now that is fucking creepy. Yeah, I wouldn't wanna deal with that. Alright, continue. Also, this is an hour long and we're 20 minutes in. Well, I'm 20 minutes in. You're a few minutes in. But I kind of caught you up with the whole surgery stuff. So, here we go.
I'll come by around 6 to pick you up at that school.
I'm material right there.
Hell
Hell
as I
yeah.
stepped out of the passenger side door. Sounds good. I closed the door and I watched the Eternal Stone wave as he drove off. Here again after a single day willing to get an implant in my head. This was either the beginning of a superhero origin story or a horror movie. I didn't quite know which yet. I stepped into the front lobby and went directly up to the desk. Stephanie was at the front desk.
Oh, a natural gas guy. I can't wait to get to that.
Hey there, Mr. Pinsky. Big day today, huh? She said before pressing a button on her phone. I'll make sure I let Dr. Brown know you're here. No worries. As I said before, I went to go sit down in one of the chairs. Oh, there's no need for that, Rick. I turned to the elevator that was closest to the waiting seats to find Dr. Brown standing there. It was the one on the opposite side from the one we had taken yesterday. Dang, that was quick. I said before stepping into the elevator. Any particular reason we're taking this one instead of the other one we took yesterday? Dr. Brown took her badge and waved in front of the scanner. It beeped and turned from a glowing red to a green before she pressed the B button on the floor level. This is the only one that goes to the basement level where the operating theater is, she said, and I looked at her, suddenly worried about what I had signed up for. She looked at my face and gave me the warm smile that I'd enjoyed yesterday. Okay, I know how horror movie it all sounds. We're a medical company that implants devices in the basement of our faceless corporate building. I can guarantee that we are no such thing. The basement is fully staffed with the best medical equipment and personnel in the entire city. 3 recovery rooms, 2 surgeons, and 4 nurses. The food comes directly from the company cafeteria upstairs, so even the food will be better than the hospital. The doors opened as she finished her rant. I opened my eyes. There was a blinding light preventing me from seeing anything, and the pain forced me to shut them again. What the hell is going on? I was just in the... I trailed off. Where the hell was I just... Stuff was fuzzy and the back of my neck hurt. Mr. Pinsky, glad to see you're awake. How are you feeling? I recognized the voice as Dr. Brown. I had a horrible headache. I have a headache.
Whoa, hella distortion.
Said in a robotic voice. What the hell? What the hell? And the robot voice said again. I see the implant is working. I tried not to think about what I was going to say before saying it. I didn't feel like hearing my own thoughts coming out again and again from a computer speaker somewhere. Why can't I remember anything? There are some complications, Dr. Brown said. I couldn't see it, but I could imagine the worried look on her face. There was some feedback from the implant after we connected it to your cerebellum, and you had lost consciousness. The surgeons and doctors were able to prevent any damage, but some memory loss is to be expected. I tried to open my eyes again. They had adjusted a bit more, and I was able to make out the hospital room that I was laying in. And Dr. Brown sat in a chair next to my bed, looking like she had made herself comfy hours ago. What time is it? I asked. I blinked a couple of times to try and make my eyes adjust to the light faster. She laughed a bit. I can see you're still a bit disoriented. All normal, I promise. And it's 7:15.
The fuck is that?
I looked frantically from one side of the bed to the other.
Liquid chlorine? Oh my
Harold was probably still out
god.
in the waiting room looking for me.
This is gas.
Harold
And
was
so
informed of your
cold in
state
here
and sent
that
his
it made it a
regards.
liquid.
She took something from her pocket and handed it in my direction. It was a phone. My phone. I clicked the
that.
screen open as soon as it was in my hands, and I saw a get some rest text from Harold on my opening screen. How long until I get out of here? I asked her. Dr. Brown took a clipboard that had been attached to the front of the bed and looked at it. Everything is looking okay according to toxology, but we want to keep you in overnight for observation. This is fucking annoying, the speaker said again. I looked around to find the speaker was on the cart in the corner of the room. It had the same machine that Dr. Zhao had used, but without a cap attached to it. And Dr. Brown laughed again. I understand. There of course will be no charge for your care. And I've also been authorized to give you a small bonus for your trouble, if you want to check to your account. I did. There's $1,000 extra since the last time that I checked it.
Ooh, $1,000
That's annoying.
You can do whatever
The
you
speaker
want
came
to
out
my
again.
head for that.
Can we turn that damn thing off? I asked the doctor. Oh, of course. She got up from her seat and turned off the machine. I hadn't noticed the hum that the machine had been making until it was off and the room became blissfully quiet. Now, I have some other things to take care of. The nurses are on call, stationed 24/7 right outside of your room. And dinner's at 9. Nice if you excuse me. Without any further explanation, she walked out of the room in a hurry. And now that Dr. Brown wasn't there to distract me, I noticed the itching on the back of my neck. I tried to feel where it was coming from, but pulled back when a small flare of pain erupted as I made contact with it. I was in the basement of a medical building in the middle of downtown. The complications from the surgery required me to stay inside, and I had an implant that broadcasted my thoughts to a machine that was in my room. Wait a minute. The implant was working. I had heard the machine broadcast my own thoughts. But the machine was on when I woke up. It was on when I wasn't awake. Why would it be on when I wasn't? The nurses were pretty quiet. They wouldn't even tell me their names, much less answer any questions about the machine or the implant. Either they had signed NDAs as well, or they really didn't know anything. I was personally leaning more towards the latter. But of course, I was the idiot who volunteered to get a mysterious device implanted in my neck, so what the hell do I know? I couldn't think of anything else to do, so I pulled up the website for dynamic medical machines. I probably should have done it a couple days ago, but hey, I thought that I could excuse myself, considering the surgery and the subsequent blackout. It was pretty typical corporate stuff, forming the future of medical implants, and leading medical technology into the future, and all of the vague nonsense that a corporation puts on their website when they don't want you to know exactly what they do. And they, however, did have a page with the heads of the company. And of course, there is a picture of a stern woman with an oddly warm smile named Dr. Isabel Brown. And because there was nothing else to do, I looked up Dr. Brown some more. She was famous in her field. Her alma mater mentioned her name in a review of the most well-known alumni at her school. A couple of patents are her name too. And she seemed to be the top-of-the-line doctor that she described everybody else as being inside this building. On the third page of the Google searches for her name, an old article popped up though. From an archived copy of 14 Times from 1979, her being 15 was not the focus of the article. What was the focus of the article was her father, Dr. Patrick Brown. He was famous in his own right too. The article was describing the testing center he ran. Dr. Patrick Brown was convinced that there were psychics in the world. Real people that he could find to prove his belief that there is something more in this world. Something great and unknown that we could experience but never fully understand. Someone that could know the shape of what card you picked without actually seeing anything. The center itself was still open according to Google, although there wasn't any mention of Dr. Patrick Brown on their website.
Oh.
Before I knew it, it was
Hell
morning,
nah.
and there was a knock on my open door. How are you doing this morning, Mr. Pinsky? Dr. Brown said from the doorway. I yawned. I couldn't sleep much. To be expected since you woke up at 6 p.m. yesterday. Is there any itching or soreness? A bit. Whatever the nurses gave me, though, helped out a lot, I'd said. There was, in fact, a bit of soreness, but painkillers are a hell of a drug. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Are you feeling for some testing of the implant? She asked. I noticed that she had a clipboard in her hand. Of course, she didn't care about how I felt. She just wanted to test if her precious implant was working correctly. Doesn't Dr. Zhao do the testing? She scoffed. I designed the damn receivers. I could handle the damn machine. She moved over to the cart and swiveled it around. This had been the very first time that I had seen the screen attached to the machine that could apparently read my thoughts. It was underwhelming when I only saw the normal desktop of a Windows computer. She clicked a couple of icons that were unrecognizable and a screen popped up. And the closest thing that I could compare it to would be an audio editing program. We're going to start the test with a simple association game. I'm going to say a word and you don't have to do anything except think about saying something. Sounds good? Sure, I guess. She clicked a couple of buttons on the large machine the computer was connected to. A couple of lights blinked on and the humming that I was somehow getting used to as well. And she started to speak. Father. Asshole. My father is an asshole. Asshole. A computerized voice said from the speaker attached to the machine. It was just as unsettling as before to hear my thoughts come out of a speaker. How did it know what to speak and what not to? How did it pick just the word asshole from what I was thinking? Job, the doctor said. I was a delivery driver for a pizza place. My job doesn't matter. Pointless, the speaker said to the doctor. I hadn't actually thought that word. At least I thought that I hadn't thought it. What is it about thinking about thoughts that make you think in circles? Circles. Thoughts and thoughts about circles. Circular shapes.
Wait, why is this... Wait, what?
A bright light and a loud sound and Dr. Brown's face was in front of mine. She was shining the light in my face. Good, you're back in the land of the living. I was dead? I asked in a fog. No, of course not. Now if you can follow the light.
Okay, this is supposed to be impossible.
It seemed worthy and Dr. Brown put the light in her pocket. She
not
waved the light in front of his
work.
face, sending feedback the best that I could at tracking it.
Oh, God.
It seemed to have stopped for now, but I think we are done with testing for today. She walked over to the machine, flipped a couple of switches, pressed a couple of buttons, and the hum disappeared. There was something odd there, but I couldn't tell what it was. There was something that I was missing.
Immediately.
And the
These
doctor
are running
continued.
out of oxygen very quickly.
And considering the continuous problems with the implant, I'm going to suggest we keep you here until we can figure out what's going on.
Dude, what the hell happened?
Keep me here? If it's okay, I'd really like to go home. I feel like it would help. Dr. Brown looked at me. Any kindness that was present on her face just a few moments ago was long gone. I'm very sorry to do this, Richard. But as the head doctor here, I'm enforcing the medical contract that you signed. The technical term is medical quarantine. I looked at her. She was keeping me here, against my will. I reached for my phone as soon as Dr. Brown had left the room. I thought that if I didn't complain about the mental quarantine that I could call the police and get my ass out of here. No luck, of course, though. Sometime between Dr. Brown coming in and leaving, they had done something to the Wi-Fi and of course I didn't get a signal in the basement. I no longer had communication to the outside world. What the fuck had I gotten myself into? I tried asking the nurse when they came in about the feedback problem that Dr. Brown had mentioned. And just like before, they were courteous but silent on any specifics. And of course, there were the complications from the implant itself. Besides the pain and soreness, there were bouts of vertigo followed by that strange circular thinking that had happened during the morning test. The third time it had happened, I came back to consciousness to find the TV on the other side of the wall turned to Fox Business Channel. So not only was I losing time, but I was doing things during the lost time. My biggest question at that point was why I felt the need to watch Fox Business.
Why is nothing in
I thought
here
in my head,
running?
Not something specific, more like a need. A desperate need for stimulation of some type. Even if that stimulation was only the ductic
There's
tone
no
of the
liquid
newspaper
in this
blathering on and on
pipe?
about some company or another I was training
Oh
over the past couple of
no,
days.
it ran out of water.
Hey, a voice from the doorway said. I looked up to see Dr. Zhao. I'm here to check up on the implant site. Is now a good time?
Ah, no.
I'm not doing much else, unless you count watching green and red arrows. And Dr. Zhao laughed. Glad to see you're in a good mood. He stepped inside of the room and took out a tiny flashlight the same size as the one Dr. Brown had used earlier. I tried to ignore the pain in my neck and I turned enough to show him. He stuck his head close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck and I heard a small click as the flashlight turned on. Everything's looking good, Daniel. Incision is healing up nice. Let me just fire up the receiver and we'll see if the signal is clear. He moved from the bed towards the machine on the cart. Rick, I said to him. My name is Rick. He stopped in his tracks and he looked at me. He had this look on his face for just a second. A look that told me, along with everything else that had been happening, that something had gone wrong. The look disappeared and the man smiled. Of course. My mind's a bit preoccupied today. He turned on the machine and I could hear the hum again. He started asking the same type of weird questions he had when he put the cap on me during our initial testing. Are you sexually attracted to children? The speaker on the car piped up before I could answer. Of course not, you slant-eyed chink. I audibly gasped. I'm so sorry. Dr. Zhao didn't seem fazed. No worries. I'm sure. He raised his voice as if he wanted somebody else to hear. That was only said in anger at what Rick is going through. I thought to myself for the umpteenth time about what I have gotten myself into. When all this was over, I was definitely asking for more money. Now, if a train leaves, I blinked. Dr. Zhao wasn't in the room. It had happened again. I lost another chunk of time and the TV was on again. This was getting ridiculous. I picked up my phone from where I'd placed it on the side table next to my bed. If any more of this lost time shit was going to happen again, I was going to record it. Thankfully, I already had a voice recording app on my phone, so the next time the doctors came in to do their test, I was going to be ready.
Build it, build it, build it. Hurry, hurry, hurry,
My
hurry, hurry.
opportunity came later that day.
Yeah, I know it's
7 p.m.
hot.
Or was it
Oh
the
damn,
next
that
day?
stuff's already running.
Even with my phone clock, it had been hard to keep track whether I'd been
Yeah,
here
yeah,
for
we
2
got
days or
water,
just one.
boys.
How are you feeling today, Mr. Pinsky? It was Dr. Brown again. Surreptitiously as possible, I changed the screen on my phone from a game to the voice recorder and I pressed the big red button. Feeling okay. Swelling is going down according to Dr. Zhao. Well, that's good to hear. I heard you've been having more feedback problems, she asked. She had not lost a serious face since she had told me that I was stuck down here. If that's what Dr. Zhao said, then sure. My voice dropped with more venom than I had intended. It was getting harder and harder to hide my annoyance and anger with her. She ignored me and went to the machine. It was still on from the last time Dr. Zhao had been in here, so she just clicked a couple of buttons and started moving the mouse around. I'm going to do a couple more tests to see if... He interrupted her. To see if the receiver is working. I get it, just do what you need to do. I'm not going anywhere. She sighed and her face softened a bit. Rick, this situation isn't ideal for any of us.
Petroleum.
I know it's a lot to ask, but could you please try not to be... I blinked. The hum of the machine was silent and Dr. Brown was no longer in the room. Reality came crashing back and I reached for my phone on the bedside table. It was 7:47 p.m. and the voice recorder was still running. I stopped the recording at 43 minutes. Hopefully my little trick would help me to understand what was going on. It answered my questions. Too many of them. I skipped the first minute and started playing just as Dr. Brown was saying. You could please try not to be so angry. We will hopefully figure out what's going on soon. The voice that answered her was the computer-generated voice from the speaker on the cart. When are you and the goddamn chink doctor going to figure out what the hell's going on? Daniel, good. That means the new algorithm Dr. Zhao slapped together is working. Dr. Brown said from the voice recorder. Great. I can speak to you through a goddamn computer whenever I want. When are you going to figure out what the hell went wrong? And give me at very least the time frame of when I can take over my new body. The computer said. And the computerized voice continued speaking through the recorder. I pay you a ridiculous amount of money to have this procedure done. And now I don't even have my own disease-riddled body to go back to. Daniel, stop calling me that. It's Mr. Warburton to you. The name the computerized voice said rang a bell in my head, but I couldn't place it at the moment. The recording continued. Mr. Warburton, we are doing everything in our power to figure out what's going on. The device is functioning to the specifications it's supposed to, so we know it has something to do with Richard. That should hopefully give you some amount of comfort, knowing that the device, meaning you, is not being damaged in the process. Dr. Brown continued after being interrupted by the computerized voice. Oh, great. I won't die for the second time anytime soon. You told me the procedure had already been done successfully with your own son, Dr. Brown. Was that a lie as well? Of course not. My son was the one who acquired Richard in the first place, so don't besmirch his name when he can't defend himself. You wouldn't even be speaking through this computer if it wasn't for him. I paused the recording. Dr. Brown's own son had already gone through the procedure. A procedure that can move you into a brand new body against somebody's will. And her son had recruited me for whoever this Daniel was. Harold had recruited me. I'd already had my suspicions, of course, but that part of the conversation destroyed any hope of help from the outside world. My best friend was gone and replaced with Dr. Brown's son. He had lied to me for months in order to give this Daniel Warburton a new body. I needed to think about how I could help Harold, if at all possible, and this recording was the best source of information that I had. So I pressed the button to continue playing it.
Do I have any more Weaselworts?
The computerized voice raised a couple of octaves.
I do.
You also said that I would have access to his memories. I believed you called it the whole kit and caboodle.
Oops.
And I have no access whatsoever. I can't even keep track of the time outside of these conversations when you decide to fire up the machine. And tell me how this existential hell is the second life you promised me. Dr. Brown's voice was calm. Mr. Warburton, you signed the release with the procedure and the risks were clearly explained to you. You knew complications were very possible. Every body is unique to the individual. A unique body chemistry and unique brain chemistry. Our initial test did show him particularly susceptible to the implant. Obviously, there was something we didn't catch in our screening. With the rush we had for you, it was entirely possible to miss something. The computerized voice was a full shot at this point. He actually carried a tone of anger along with the volume increase. You are the genius doctor who came up with this. I'm sorry that my cancer rushed your work. I paid for you to do your job and I paid extra to rush it.
Damn,
Just
dude,
get
this
this damn
game
thing figured out so I can
freaky.
get back to work. Something on the TV caught my attention and I paused the recording. A picture of an old, sick-looking man came on the screen, followed with breaking news. The head of a large investment banking firm had died. The reason a business channel decided to cover this news was apparent, as he was a very big player in the investment world. They called him a visionary for predicting the oncoming rise of cell phones and mobile gaming, and investing in a lot of tech industries. They also mentioned a lot of his later investments, since being diagnosed with a particularly untreatable form of cancer, and his large investments in the
Where's
biomedical
Bubbles?
industry,
There she is.
including investments in a startup in Phoenix called
Get
Dynamic
him.
Medical Machines.
Get him.
Daniel Warburton, the tech investment giant, died at 83. The Fox News anchor said to the camera. I
Please
turned
don't
off
be
the
a
TV.
heart.
I didn't feel like seeing the face of a man I had been sold to as a product.
It's a banana.
I looked back down at my phone. There's still no signal to access the internet. I had
It's a
no best friend
banana,
looking for me.
dude. She made a banana.
My family didn't care enough about me to know that I was gone.
How much coal do I have?
I had the
8.9
mind of the
tons,
1%
that's
stuck in my
fine.
head, looking to take over, and a literal team of mad scientists trying to figure out why the brain implant didn't work.
Just got some sandstone.
What I did have, though,
Got,
was a
actually, I have
recording of
copper.
my own broken
Got a lot of
mind.
gold amalgam. Got some wolframite.
Wait a minute. I opened the recording
Iron.
app and I went back about a minute in the recording and I listened to it again. I needed to double check something that Daniel had said. I have no access whatsoever. I can't even keep track of what time it is outside of these conversations when you decide to fire up the machine. The blackouts I've been having aren't just losses in my memory. And Daniel can't remember them either. I was, or he was, obviously doing something during the blackouts that neither of us could remember. I didn't have any explanation for it, as I was less versed on whatever was going on than even Daniel. But the only time Daniel could speak to them is when they turned on the machine. And the only time he could even keep track of it was when the machine was on. I looked over at the machine in the corner. It was off. I looked back at the phone in my hand. I had a decision to make right now. I didn't know when Dr. Zhao or Dr. Brown or
You
any
still
of the
there,
nurses
Rafa?
would show up. If any of them had heard the recording, they'd probably take the phone and the charger it was connected to and I would be shit out of luck. If I decided to turn on the machine and try to talk to Daniel with the information I had, I wouldn't have much time to try and get him to get us out of here. I didn't even know if there was anything I could say to him that would get him to expand his incredible resources to get me out of here. But my circumstances dictated desperation. So the real question I had to ask myself was, can I threaten a ghost with death? A knock at the door. Hey buddy, how's it going? Harold, or at least it was Harold's body and Harold's voice and Harold's hair. It was even Harold's smile. But I do remember that it wasn't Harold in there. It could be better, honestly. I keep having these blackouts and they can't figure out what the hell is going on. I stop for a second, suddenly thinking of an idea. I don't think Dr. Brown knows exactly what she's doing. I looked closely at Harold when he had mentioned Dr. Brown. There was the slightest hint of annoyance before the smile returned. If I hadn't been paying close attention, I probably would have missed it. And that did it. The very last hope that Harold was anywhere in there was finally gone. I'm sure they're doing everything they can, man. She was always super nice when I was here. If there's something wrong, I'm sure they'll figure it out soon. And Dr. Brown's son, or Harold, said, now that I knew the truth, every second I talked to him was torture. Every second this thing pretended to be my friend. Every single second it filed through my friend's memories and did its best to pretend to be my best friend.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Do you think they have any cameras in here or anything? I asked him. Huh? In the room here. Do you think they put any cameras or have any mics in here or anything? He looked around, doing a pretty good impression of someone who was unfamiliar with where he was. I don't see any, but I'd be surprised if this place didn't have cameras up the wazoo. Why do you ask, man?
Wazoo, who the fuck?
I thought for a second. I really needed him close enough to whisper something that a camera wouldn't pick up. I was wondering something about, you know. I made a quick mime of hitting a joint with my fingers. He laughed. Dude, they did a drug test. They know more about you than you do. Shit, man, I'm sure they do. I just need to ask you something, and I don't want the camera to pick it up. He sighed. Fine, dude, but I don't see what the big fuss is all about. He stepped closer to the bed and he put his ear close to my head. I turned and I covered my mouth to whisper in his ear. Don't let them know, bud. I know who you are. When I move my head back and stop whispering, you're gonna make some excuse to leave, and if you let your mother or anybody else know that I know who you are, and the second I get a chance, I'm gonna rip this implant out of my neck and your mother's precious project will lose all of its funding. Got it?
Ooh.
I pulled my mouth from his ear and I looked at him. He turned his head slightly and I could see the staring eyes of somebody who definitely wasn't Harold. I didn't know if he would take the threat of ripping out the implant seriously, but at this point, I could only hope that he would. I didn't know if he would even do what I said. Sure, dude, he said in Harold's voice. But I could see behind the eyes now. There was nothing of my friend. And memories and mannerisms, yes, but nothing of my actual friend. So,
Damn,
yeah,
that's
I was
cold.
hoping you could grab that stuff in my apartment. That sound cool, man? I asked him. Yeah, sure. Anything else I could grab for you while I'm there? I thought for a second. A pair of pants,
Where
maybe?
are all my
I
dupes,
haven't
and
given
why
you
are
back
they
the pair I
not
had
coming
when I came in
down?
here. It gets a bit drafty sometimes.
And getting the
He
damn
stared.
Weezwort. This is starting to piss
Of course.
me off.
Should I go now? I nodded. Yeah, it's getting weird
So
now
can you
wearing pants in front
please
of other
come
people.
down and get it? Like anytime
Harold
soon now
laughed.
would be great.
But of course he wasn't
I
Harold.
need more Weezworts.
I had to make sure to remember that.
Dude,
However, I
I'm
had managed to
actually
do
someone
it.
else in Ross's
Dr.
body.
Brown's son was
I mean,
listening to me
you
for
act
now,
like him, so
and I needed
that's
to
fine.
do something with that. Maybe Daniel could help me out. I stared at the machine in the corner of the room. How was I supposed to talk to Daniel without going
The
into
hell?
whatever
Is there
blackout they put me
hydrogen
into?
in there? Where the
I
hell
thought
did
that to be
hydrogen
experiments
come
they performed on me
from?
So far.
Hello,
I had done
they
something
probably
on the
opened this
computer and
door or
turned on the
something.
receiver somehow.
And it let some hydrogen
And
out.
of course, everything went black and
Okay, that's
I
fine.
couldn't remember
I don't
anything.
really care.
Except I didn't black out every single time. There were the tests at the beginning when the speaker just shouted out what I was thinking. Not exactly what I was thinking, but just a general idea of what I was thinking. That could have been Daniel. Or at least the piece of Daniel that was coherent enough to speak and interpret my thoughts. Just a day ago, I was wondering how to spend my money, and now I have to figure out how to work a goddamn mind reading machine. Or maybe it was 2 days ago. It was hard to keep track when there was no sunlight and blacking out every 30 seconds.
It's getting
I grabbed my phone from the side table.
kinda hot in here.
10:07 p.m.
I don't really like
The
that.
nurses had already brought dinner, and unless I summoned them for some reason, they had no
The
reason
air
to
I'm
come out.
blowing out is
Dr. Brown had
really,
never shown
it's
up later
temperate.
than 7 p.m.
It's a nice
And
temperature.
I'd only ever seen Dr. Zhao once since coming
It's
down
getting
here.
hot up here, and heat
Fuck
rises.
it. I got up out of bed and I tried to stand up. I was dizzy for a moment as the blood rushed from my head to the rest of my body.
What do I
I had
do?
to grab the bed and steady myself for a moment before I could finally hold myself up. After another minute, the dizziness stopped and
I'm
I
someone
was able to
else in
stand on my
Garrett's
own.
body, so I mean,
The machine stood
fool
in
me
the corner of
once,
the room.
shame on you. Fool me
I had
twice,
seen Dr.
gotcha,
Brown
bitch.
turn on the machine more than once, so I flipped through the switches I remembered her flipping, and I started up the screen. The machine turned on and began humming in that all too familiar way. The screen showed a couple of different programs on the screen, and unfortunately, I had no idea which one of the programs Dr. Brown had opened to allow Daniel to be heard through the speaker. I didn't know what to do, so I just decided to try each one. I had a bit of time for trial and error, so I opened the first program that was listed. And for once in my life, I had a bit of luck on my side, and the audio editing looking program opened on the first try.
Nice.
I tried clicking around the program looking
Mission
at the drop-down
accomplished.
menus, having no idea what anything did, before I saw a recently opened section with a list of 2 different files. One of the files was a random looking string of numbers and letters, but the other was clearly named Daniel. Well, that was pretty damn convenient. I opened up the Daniel file and the various lines of the screen began to move and the hum of the machine got louder. The speaker crackled alive. "Is that you again, Dr. Brown?" He was there. The man who paid a lot of money to steal my body, my life, and my youth was speaking to me right now. Neither of us were in a good position. Both of us were stuck down here with a malfunctioning piece of machinery, and nobody could figure out what the hell was going on. Both of us were in trouble as long as we stayed here. Mr. Warburton, we have a lot to talk about. Who is this?
Damn it.
I swear if it's that goddamn I'm not Dr. Zhao. My name is Richard Pinsky. I interrupted the speaker. He paused for a second before asking, "Who?" I sighed in annoyance. Of course he wouldn't even think of me as a person. I was just an empty body for him to inhabit. "My name is Richard, and Dr. Brown mentioned me in your previous conversations, I believe," I said confidently. The speaker didn't respond. I sighed again. "I'm the goddamn meat suit you paid Dr. Roberts a ridiculous sum of money to buy." "Oh, yes, what can I do for you?" the speaker said amicably. This didn't make any sense. Where was the asshole I heard in the recording that yelled every other sentence? "Mr. Warburton, I'm not going to sugarcoat the situation. Both of us are in a lot of trouble. The implant is malfunctioning for whatever reason, and I keep having blackouts. Look, child, I simply don't care what's going on with you. You obviously went through a lot of trouble to turn on this machine and talk to me. Tell me
Damn.
why I should listen to you." The speaker spoke the ultimatum. What could I say to convince him to help me? The titan of industry who controlled the fate of the tech industry for nearly his entire life. A multi-millionaire who sounded like he had funded the entire project in order to cheat death. Hell, he had already died. Correction. He was dead to the outside world. And if he was dead to the outside world and still wanted to control his empire, then the ownership of said empire would have to be transferred from him to me somehow. And so I bluffed him. "I know about the will," I said. The speaker stayed silent. It hadn't worked. My last chance to get out of this hellhole had just passed, and I fucked it up like I fuck everything up. I was going to be chained to this bed the second Dr. Brown and Dr. Zhao came back and talked to Daniel. There wasn't anything that I could do. "You have some balls, kid," the speaker said suddenly. "And you would have to be me by mine if I, well, had any. But the will means nothing once they fix the implant." He was listening to me. And maybe if I gave him some more reasons to think that he wouldn't make it out of here, and then he could use the full force of his lawyers and his money to get me the hell out of here. To get us out of here, really. And I was pretty sure I had something that would convince him.
I think this is legit about
You
to
are
just
dumb, Daniel.
overflow.
The implant is obviously faulty otherwise. You would obviously be in control of my body and I wouldn't even know that anything was going on. I don't even know how long I've been down here because of the amount of blackouts I've had. And they're
Whoa.
only getting worse. But Dr. Brown, I interrupted Daniel. Dr. Brown and Dr. Zhao are only two doctors. If we left here, we could have a full team of doctors figuring out what the hell was going on. The implant is faulty, and do you want to take the chance that it'll break and kill both of us? The speaker was silent. I had taken a big chance coming on as strong as they did. I could only hope that he would listen to me and believe me about the blackouts, even if it was a bit of an exaggeration. Unfortunately, you're probably right, he finally admitted. Do you have a phone? I do, but they've done something and I can't get a call out. I think I have someone who could help me, though. I was surprised that I could sleep considering how nervous I was to see. A couple of hours, in fact, so I was plenty rested up when I heard a knock on my door. It was Dr. Brown's son in the guise of Harold.
Where's my colony?
He was carrying a pair of my jeans that he'd probably thrown in the bed.
So,
You're an
I'm
idiot,
thinking I
man.
move all this power
He
stuff
said to me with no pretense
up
of
into
pretending
this
to be
section
Harold.
right here.
I paused.
It's just giant
Excuse
area
me.
that I have,
But you're a lucky idiot.
so I can make
My
room,
mother
more
doesn't
room
arrive
in
at the
here.
lab for another hour.
I need to
Dr.
open
Zhao
this
is
up
taking
too
a nap
and
in his
let all
lab.
that flow into this
If I wasn't on
area.
the cameras most of the time, they would have seen you talking to Daniel. I looked down at the pair of jeans he had thrown on the bed.
Yeah, so I'm gonna do
Why are you helping me? Why did you even listen to me when I let you know I knew who you were? He sighed in a way that I never heard Harold sigh and spoke to me in a cadence and tone Harold never had. I heard the anger in your voice, and my mom took your best friend away from you. He paused for a second and then asked, do you know what the implant does? I started putting the pants on he had thrown on the bed, besides pull some evasion of the body snatcher shed. He laughed. It bothered me because it reminded me of Harold's easy laugh and smile. It holds a person's consciousness, or it's a copy. I'm not 100% sure on that point. It's not something that I want to think about. But if someone implanted it into a body and hooked it into their brain, what's already there doesn't go away. I still have access to Harold's memories and what he knows. If you're trying to make me feel sympathetic,
Bro, this
it's
is
not working.
insane.
Of course not. That's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to let you know that I know what Harold thought of you, how he thought of you, all the good memories of you he had, and how much of a friend you were to him. You don't deserve this crap, and Harold doesn't deserve it either.
Crap.
You don't have to worry about calling Daniel's lawyers, because I already did. I stopped putting on my pants and I looked at him. What? I already called his lawyers. They should be here any minute, so you could probably finish putting your pants on. He pointed at the pants that were still only halfway on. I laughed. I probably
Oh
shouldn't meet
hell.
my new lawyer
Oh
without
hell,
pants.
hell, hell. Oh no.
The lawyers came in with a pair of cops about 30 minutes later.
Igneous.
And Dr. Zhao didn't make much of a fuss when confronted with an injunction demanding the release of one Mr. Richard Pinsky for a federal judge.
I really need someone to build that because
Without
I
Dr.
do
Brown at the
not
building,
need all
everybody
that bad
backed down
shit
to the force of
flow in.
lawsuits and
Yes,
kidnapping
thank you.
accusations.
All the chlorine and shit in there. I
I'm
don't
in a
need
real
that in my
hospital this
base.
time. The nurses are nice
Oh,
and very specific
how
in
did
answering my questions. The doctors can't make heads or tails of the implant in my neck bud. They're hopeful of the specialist that Daniel's money is flying into the premium hotel suite of a hospital room. I told them what I knew about the implant, and while they didn't believe me, they did listen to the recording on my phone. That plus a couple of court document statements from people who worked in the Dynamic Medical Machines building to
wait,
convince
what?
them.
How did?
I still have blackouts. They aren't getting worse, but they're definitely not getting better.
Oh
Daniel was still
my
here.
god, no.
I was right about the will leaving me
no,
for most of his
no.
fortune. And there were rumblings from a distant relative, but Daniel assured me, through the machine that sat consistently in the room on my request, that will was ironclad. Which was unfortunate for him as he was legally dead. Although he seemed pretty content for now taking care of his money and watching Fox News. Tim, Dr. Brown's son had visited the hospital once or twice to check on me. I can't really blame him for what his mother did to him, implanting him against his will into my best friend. He could have just not recruited me and gotten me into this situation, but I feel bad for him. He volunteered to have his implant removed, but the doctors took one look at his x-ray and said it would kill him. So nothing is too bad now as I lay in this hospital bed and write this down. They're gonna bring me in for some type of surgery tomorrow. I don't know
Oh my
if it's the same
god,
surgery
dude,
that
these
would have killed Tim, but
idiots.
it's hard to pay attention sometimes. I trust them because they are the ones without implants in their heads. The ones without heads. Implants without one. Heads without implants. Implants without heads.
No way, that's the end. Oh my god, that's the end. You still there? Cause I'll start up another one. There's a few other ones. Just gonna continue. I was a law enforcer in a small area. Weird things happened. This one's an hour. Here we go.
I didn't do it. That's what I've been thinking to myself for the past 40 years. After all, it's true. I didn't do a thing. But yet, someone did. Someone did it. Something's yet to be explained. So, it's the 1970s and I got back home from investigating a murder. It's pretty simple stuff. A young girl gets murdered, her scalp gets removed. Pretty gruesome stuff, but for my job, it's par for the course. I'm not gonna beat around the bush and pretend like it's a big mystery. You've read the title. I was a cop. I have been for 10 years. I love my job, despite the many weird things that happen with it. Now, I've seen plenty of paranormal crap, and maybe I can tell you the story someday. But none have been as personal as this.
I hope someone locks the door on these idiots.
It started with my knives beginning to vanish.
Please lock
Now,
the door.
you may be thinking, what does knives vanishing have to do with a horrific murder? Well, it didn't at first. It was just a massive inconvenience. The first time I really noticed was because it was Thanksgiving, and I was trying to get a knife to cut the turkey. I go to the drawer and there's pretty much 2 knives left. Now, I'm
If they
gonna be
need to get out, they
100%
can
honest
get
here.
out there the actual way.
I haven't been paying much attention
Until
up
then,
until this
piss
point.
off.
But then I saw it, and I realized that the knives were gone. I looked
Okay,
everywhere.
do I
but
want to use
I couldn't
smart
find a damn
batteries or
knife.
jumbo batteries?
It was that point in which I started to replace the
I guess we
knives,
can just use
only for them
jumbos.
to go away a few minutes later, with my back turned. To this day, I have no idea what the hell it was. At this point, my daughter was around 5 years old. Thus it was reasonable to say that she could have taken them without knowing what it was. Perhaps she thought it was a childish game. I went to ask her calmly. I know I shouldn't given the situation. After all, my 5-year-old daughter probably has my knives. Cecil, can you please give me the knives back? Cecil looked at me with a confused look.
Hell no, they're my knives,
Knives,
bitch.
Daddy? What are knives? I simply replied, the little sharp things, the ones with the handles on them. I went to grab one. I grabbed one of the few knives I still had in the drawer, and I returned. Like this, honey. They're dangerous, so I need them back. Have you seen any of these? No, I've seen the Sharp Man take one, though. At this point, I was confused. She had never mentioned this imaginary friend before, and this sounds like some horror movie villain. The Sharp Man? Yeah, the Sharp Man. He's funny. He's got black clothing on and a weird mask. But most importantly, he's covered in knives. He says he's friendly, but he can't show himself to you. He says that you'll be mad. He says I need to keep him a secret. Well, darling, I can assure you this Sharp Man isn't real. Now, I'll ask you again, where did you put them? I don't have them. The Sharp Man does. Now, I knew this conversation wasn't going anywhere, and pressing harder wasn't going to accomplish anything. So I took a step back and I left the room. I went to find the knives in her room. They weren't there though, and I swear, I could have heard her say, "The man is mad at you. He says you were somewhere you shouldn't have been." Now this was getting weird. She should have no knowledge about Harmony Way or any of the goings-on in that area. Neither should any 5-year-old kid. But she is my daughter, so I assumed she had simply made it up. Naive of me, I know. I forgot about it, as the cycle of buying knives only for them to be taken away continued. It was annoying, but it wasn't scary by any stretch. Hell, if that were all this amounted to, you wouldn't be reading this. It would be a strange phenomenon of a young girl imagining a friend for her to play with. A few times within about a week between, I would try to get my daughter to explain about the knives. I mean, seriously, it's not funny at this point. I was starting to get pissed off. But one day, I'd say about 7 months later, shit hit the fan. Pretty much I was relaxing in my room watching TV per usual. At that point, I had heard a scream. I thought it was just the show at first, but then I realized something. It sounded like my daughter. I went upstairs in a hurry to find the gruesome scene. As you can guess, my daughter was stabbed with the knives. All of them. And I mean all of them. Just hundreds of knives sticking out of her.
Oh.
Blood was pouring out, staining the carpet. Her organs were spilling out as well. Every bone was visible, and her skin was torn off clean.
My
Not an inch
God.
of flesh remained. And now I was looking around like crazy at this point. I could have sworn if there was somebody who was lying around with my knives, ready to kill my daughter at any moment, I might have seen him. I didn't see anywhere that he could have hid. We hadn't found the guy to this day. And what's worse was what was on the walls. Don't go after me. Don't return there. I didn't do it, I swear, guys. I'm not crazy. And after the incident, I was framed. Naturally, I was the only one that was home. The knives had no DNA except for mine. And hers. My wife divorced me, thinking that I did it. I didn't. Someone out there did, though. Some sicko ruined my life and my family. And someday, I'll make them pay. Well, enforcing the laws for as long as I have, specifically around a decade or so, you'll see some strange things. Whenever it be horrific, like the time my daughter was
Rafa,
murdered with
you
my
there, my
weapons or
guy?
anything else. Well, it's a wild ride for sure. And stranger still, if you're patrolling the area that I have. See, I patrol a small place in Texas, and within that area is an even smaller area. And this place would happen to be a road. A roadway, really. A shortcut that normally many people use. However, this place
Ow.
has a reputation for housing the odd, mysterious, and sometimes scary. This little roadway is known as
Yeah,
Harmony
you there?
Way.
Okay. Do you like the story
It's
so
that
far or
one
what?
special place, central to all conspiracy theories. Now, as I mentioned, this is a small area. I'm talking teeny weeny small. So small I'm pretty sure nobody's heard of it except for the folk around here. Well, I guess until now. You see, as of late, the townsfolk are getting anxious. They're starting to tell stories about their Harmony Way experiences. And so, I thought to myself, why not tell a few of my own? After all, Harmony Way is the place where absolutely anything can happen. And well, absolutely anything does happen. Now, I probably won't begin to describe all the going-ons in the area, but I can at least fit in what I can remember. Story 1. The Deer Crash. So, the very first one took place on my first day at work. I was pretty nervous. I was with my partner, Chris Granite, who was pretty friendly, although rough and serious. Before I go any further, I should probably tell you that this is one of the least scary stories that I've experienced, but it's the first run-in I've had with the paranormal of the area. So, I was patrolling the road. Yes, that road. And I happened to find a deer. I was observing it, just minding its own business on the road.
Alright, whatever.
And then a car came by.
That's fine.
It was speeding, way past the limit. It was about to hit the deer. And then the deer simply stayed still. The car was the one that was damaged. Thankfully, the driver was fine, and due to the accident at hand, I let him loose with a $100 fine so he could pay for his damages. I got reprimanded for the error later. Yo, Charles, what the hell? What? The guy crashed into a deer. It was perfectly fine. Yeah, odd shit happens. But welcome to Harmony Way. This guy knew what he was getting into. Speeding in Harmony Way of all places. Besides, we don't give tickets around here for speeding. We don't? Nah, not in Harmony Way anyway. There's a sort of unspoken rule about this particular street. Namely, if strange shit happens on Harmony Way, and a person is harmed from it, even if they were engaging in small-time illegal activities, so like speeding or texting and driving or something like that, well, we pardon it. Since the said paranormal experience is usually penance enough. So this stuff is on our side. He chuckled a bit, as if I'd said something dumb. Charles, there's a lot you've got to learn. The things that go on in this area, it doesn't take sides. It just is. It's like nature in a weird way. Nature isn't an inherent good or an inherent evil. It's just neutral. In this game of life, you know. Yeah. After that, nothing else really happened around here. I packed up and I went home. Story 2. The Human Bird.
The human bird.
This is another relatively harmless experience. So, I was in my second week of patrolling the area, and after a bit, I was finally tasked with patrolling Harmony Way again with Chris. We were just recovering from an experience with a missing kid in the forest. But you know, that's for another day. So, it was a few hours of boredom, you know, except for some speeders and a bit of cloud watching. You know, the whole "this cloud looks like the state of Texas" type of thing. And just when we were about to give up, we saw something in the sky. A bird. Now, you may be thinking, Charles, why are you talking about a bird? Well, there's one tiny little detail about this particular bird. It had a face on it. And not just any face either. This particular face was the face of my mother, who was dead for 10 years of Alzheimer's. Now, I'm no genius, but shouldn't this be impossible? I look at Chris confused and he nods. And let me guess, you know the face of that bird. I look at him in shock. How do you even know that, and why is there a bird with a face here even to begin with? Never mind my own mother's. It's like I told you before. Strange shit happens here. One day it's Elvis's ghost, and another day you get transported to another dimension for a few seconds. That's why we're here. To make sure people stay safe and don't end up dead. Dead. People die here. A brief pause. Anyway.
Big oof.
That cloud over there looks like a donut, doesn't it? Story 3. My own doppelganger. Well, this marks the 4th time I've been in Harmony Way. The 3rd time didn't really give me anything new. But the 4th time, oh lord. I mentioned Harmony Way gets scary. Well, this is my earliest experience of the true horrors of Harmony Way. So, I was patrolling the area per usual, stopping speeders, keeping the streets safer than they would be, although it's still relatively unsafe. I turned to Chris. You know, Chris, I've been wondering. Yeah? And Chris turns to me. Well, so far, things haven't been very dangerous. You mentioned people dying. A new topic. How was your day so far, Charles? No, I'm serious. Why isn't anything terrible happening? No demonic possessions. Chris looked around and leaned over to me. Charles, you don't want to talk about this crap right now. Not in the middle of the street. Why? He whispers. I think it has its own consciousness. It can hear us as long as we're in it. We have found this through experimentation. Oh, well, seeing the anomalies happening so far, I wouldn't be surprised. And I didn't see you as a threat, to answer your question. How so? The first thing to know, the more you know about Harmony Way, the more dangerous it is. Once again, it's been done through HQ experimentation. Just make sure to look the other way and you won't be in for much. I nod slowly. It makes sense after all. If this thing has a consciousness, it would be able to hear us, right? I don't inquire anymore. Not because there aren't a million questions running through my head. After all, anybody working in this particular area is bound to drown in questions surrounding these anomalies. But rather, because we saw something.
Trevor, just
Myself.
yeet yourself off a cliff.
Specifically, it was walking across the street. There were a few differences, though. Firstly, the eyes were black. I mean coal black, as if it didn't reflect light. I'd describe it as Vanta black. That one shade of black so dark it doesn't reflect light.
Oh, Vanta black?
seen the
Hell yeah,
articles,
that's
right?
the truest black.
And that was discovered partly from this. But that's another story.
I'm out of cookie.
Second, the being was way too tall. I'm talking super tall and skeletal. Easily 10 feet in height. And lastly,
Okay, I'm gonna have to start
it was
getting some more
twitching.
coal right now.
very much so.
Because I don't have
Well,
this area
that
up and
wasn't
running
actually
yet.
the last thing. I lied.
So I need to
The
do
last
that.
one came when it spoke.
And
What are you doing here?
let's see, it needs to
Come
go
with me.
down.
I have safety from the end. It was a distorted voice, like it was different audio clips attached together to form the sentence. Something seemed suspicious. And then Chris declares, "A pleasurable day it has been." The being hissed and got on all fours. "I will find you eventually, and when I do, I will kill you. We must survive. Never last."
This guy sounds
The creature
lit.
quickly crawled away, swearing revenge at this point. I turned to Chris. I began to ask, "What was that? What did you say? How did you possibly know?" Look, if you think this is the first time you've ever encountered one of these doppelgangers, you're terribly mistaken. In fact, they're incredibly common. That doesn't mean they're not dangerous. He begins to pack up. Don't let them touch you, otherwise you'll turn into a pile of boils and flesh. You'll have to be put into the Foundation's hands.
Let me eat this tangerine
Trust
real
me.
quick.
You don't want that. He
I need
packed up his
sustenance.
things. After I asked where he was going, he said he had to report this incident to the Foundation, and that it was best I just went home
The
for the day.
SCP Foundation or what?
Story 4. 1 billion hands. And so at this point, I had been patrolling for about a month now. Now there was more paranormal shit going on, but it was mostly harmless stuff. Chris came in about an hour early. He said it was a Foundation meeting, although he isn't technically a part of the Foundation. He just reports to the officers. According to Chris, they're the guys researching Harmony Way. I didn't know much about them at that time, though. So, his car came
Rough
over
over
to the
there, give
parking
me a
lot,
woo.
but then suddenly, it crashed. I saw a hand reach up and grab the tire, poking multiple holes in them. I looked down to see more hands reaching up to grab me. I just barely stepped out of the way before they could touch me with their claws, doing who knows what with me. So, I kept going across the entire road on my bare 2 feet. In hindsight, I should have gone for the vehicle immediately, but I was a dumb 20-something, not like I knew any better.
Hella hungry,
So I kept
dude.
going on my own
Gotta
2
eat
feet,
this
still
orange.
running away from the hands from the ground.
And then get back
The
to
worst
this
thing
game.
possible happened. There's some guy clearly looking for an adventure to brag to his friends about, walking on the side of the road. Christ, the imagery. I saw the hands grab the poor guy, squeezing him tight. Muscles were visible, as the guy was being squeezed hard. All the innards of him were exposed as his leg gets squeezed tighter and tighter. And then the boils began. They started to form absolutely everywhere on him, as the thing starts to thankfully let go. And soon enough, he became a blob of skin, muscle, and boil. As the arm started to go back underground, Chris came up and marveled the mess left behind. Yeah, I remember the first time I'd see the handies get their victims. Probably the single moment I realized. He then put his hand on me. This isn't going to be one of those jobs you simply quit. We're here for a reason. We're here to stay. This is going to stay with us forever, probably. Pack your stuff. We're going to the Foundation. Thank you all for the support of the last entry. I'm really glad everybody enjoyed my adventures in Harmony Way, and I'm looking forward to showing everybody more. You know, it's funny. I may have been put in real-life endangerment in the past, but now, I can look back on it with a strange sense of nostalgia. Story 5. The Foundation. This story is a continuation of the last one.
Alright.
You know, when Chris was telling me to head on into the Foundation and all. This isn't all that scary, but the Foundation itself got really scary as things went on during the decade of work I've done. So, I entered the Foundation building. I looked around and I saw a white room, with men running to and from. There were many rooms, and before I could go any further, Chris pulled me to the desk, with a stereotypical secretary-looking lady. Hey there, Officer Red Spitting and White Lip. Here to file a report. I looked at Chris strangely. Before I could ask, he turned to me. We don't use real names. We're assigned names. Specifically, names relating to snakes. I nod slowly. Okay. Chris turns back to the secretary lady. So anyway, we're here to report a D127 class anomaly, which activated an A2 class scenario. I am pleased to report there have been no A1 class scenarios, however. I looked at him oddly for a few seconds, before finally putting my thoughts into words. What? He nodded understandingly and explained. It's code speak for, hey, a doppelganger turned a civilian to mush and no civilian saw it happen. I nodded and I looked at the secretary. She looked at me and she replied, Ah, I must have forgotten. I'm Operative Garden, but you can call me Sheila. I reply, I'm Red Spit. Chris interrupts. I'm Red Spitter. You're White Lip. Oh, well, I'm White Mouth, but you can call me Charles. Chris replies, No, she can't, and you can't call her by her real name either. It's Foundation policy. I threw my hands up in the air. Whatever. Chris told Garden, report the incident to the Overseer. Will do, Red Spitter. See you later, White Mouth. I waved back at her before Chris pulled me forward and pushed me out of the door.
White Mouth.
Story 6. The Return of the Deer.
Oh, it's the deer again.
So, as corny as it sounds, the deer had returned that day.
God damn.
You know, it always returns every time I'm there.
Bro, that deer's OP.
It's always there, every day at the exact same time. 9 a.m.
Is that a snack machine? That's a vending machine. Excuse me? What? There's a vending machine down there.
Does it hurt anyone?
I didn't know that existed.
Well, it's a 50-50.
Look at all the crude oil that I have now, dude.
50-50.
Oh, this is gonna be OP. And I even have a
What
geyser.
does a deer murder people?
Well, reservoir, actually. But
Trust me. When you've
same
been
old
here long
potatoes.
enough, you'll come to despise everything about that deer. But why don't we hunt it down? You know, shoot it and whatnot. We tried.
Get him.
The bullets bounce off toward the person who shot the bullet.
Oh.
So it kills the shooter. Yep. It's also carnivorous. As he said this, it reached down and ate a bunch of rabbits. Swallowed them whole.
Oh, God.
I swear that I saw its teeth get sharp. As the purple crescent on its head started to glow, it walked away on all fours and vanished midair.
Oh, damn. I forgot
Just
I
turned to
made
me.
coal. Shit.
Yeah, it does that. If I were you, I'd get used to it. And not get close. Story 7. The Little Kid. Now, if you're anything like me, you find little kids scary. That feeling only increased after this experience. So, it's been a few months since I joined the police force and the first story had occurred. I had done my fair share of trying to track down missing kids, but this had to be one of the most frightening. See, this was a family who had lost their 3 children a few years back. Supposedly, there's an ongoing investigation to find them. The key word here being, supposedly. I went to the home with Chris. He pulled me to the side and he explained. You see, Charles, in October there's usually many missing children cases, almost triple the norm. The reason we don't explain the phenomenon is because we know what's making them all disappear. I tilt my head in confusion. If you know so much, why don't you go after it? It's not that simple. It's an anomaly. The nature of this anomaly is unknown, but we have given it the D98 class rating. Thus, the disappearances aren't a police matter. They're a Foundation matter. They've been hunting this thing for years, but so far, it's a no-go. Right now, we've got to pay lip service to the family here, and then watch this Halloween for any phenomenon.
Phenomena, do.
I nodded slowly. He adds, and don't be a hero either. Every new officer tries to be a hero first Halloween, and every year, they just barely make it out alive, if at all. So, if not for your sake, don't die for my sake. I nod and we both knock on the door. An elder woman and her husband came out. The woman sobbed on my shoulder and Chris shook the husband's hand. Chris said, we've been making strides to try and find the monster. He looks at me. You're responsible for this. The woman looked at Chris. Thank you. I'm sure you'll get him. You have to. Chris replies, we will most certainly try. And with that, the two of us went off. We looked around a bit and first on the street, and then into the woods. And that was when we found something. It was a clearing about 10 feet wide. It was a large circle of nothing but dirt. And then I turned around to see a little kid. It wasn't the kid we were looking for, but it fit the bill for another kid. I told you, there were a lot of missing children. So, I naturally went to talk to it. Chris put his hand on my shoulder. Don't be a hero, Charles. I looked at the kid. I asked for it to speak. Chris started to yell. Charles, you don't want to. You are here. It sounded wrong. Like it was multiple tapes all modified to look like they were from the same clip. But it failed horribly.
How?
Either way, we decided to run. But I swear, when I turned around slightly, I saw a large gray blur charging towards me. I saw lots of teeth too. Lots of sharp ones. And there were legs all crawling towards us.
Whoa, another
Other than that,
anti-thermal.
the creature is too fast to
Another
see.
fire. So I have two now. I have that
Afterward,
one
there was a sharp
and
sting,
this one.
the deepest pain that I'd ever felt. And then blackout.
This one has water in it.
I woke up in a
I got it now,
foundation with
too.
a deep gash on my stomach. Chris and
Gotta
Sheila
pump
were
that
looking
out.
over my hospital bed. And so were a few men in lab coats with blank white masks, as in all white. I wonder how they could even see. Gosh, White Lip, you had me worried there. I told you not to be a hero, not to talk to the thing, not when you're in its territory anyway. Sheila added, I was so worried, so scared that you wouldn't wake up. And with that, she stroked my cheek a bit. It tickled somewhat. I looked up at her and I smiled. And Chris put his hand on my shoulder and said, Gardner and I will head back to the main desk to report what had happened. You heal up. This could be a while. And as they walked out of the door, I started my 3 months of hospital time. Turns out, there is poison in my system. When I did get out, I learned caution, and caution would aid me in my travels. Because oh boy, things didn't get much better from here. Story 8. The lights in the sky. So it's been about a year now. I've gone through my life's share of terrible monsters and ghouls. But if I were to tell you about each and every one of them, we'd be here all day. And this would be about a 200-part story. No, I don't want that, and probably neither do you. But needless to say, I didn't find anything else out about the Foundation. During that time, one mission I had was to find info about the Foundation. After all, when in the vicinity of such a strange organization, how could one not? In the meantime, I had been getting closer to Sheila. not using it for info as she knows about as much as I do. But in a way, I don't get close to most people. But this isn't about that. Although I was pressing Chris on the matter. Chris, I've been wondering. What's up, bud? Are you a part of the Foundation? Nah, I just take orders from them, and I'm told to report to Gardner about incidents that I find. I've actually never met anybody else besides her that works there. And I've never been anywhere within that facility that isn't the hospital or the meeting room. The only thing I know that you don't know is all the coding. Not true. I've been brushing up on my code lingo. A class is a civilian. B class is staff. C class is Harmony Way.
Right, dude.
D
Good night.
class are the anomalies. And E class is leakage and whistleblowers, right? Yeah, you forgot about I class though. What about F through H class? There is no F class. G and H class is for high-ranking employees only. I class is in the case of D class since a break into the facility are out. Out? Oh, yeah, out. The second to last thing I know about these guys. They have some D-class anomalies for studying. Isn't putting D-class and anomaly together redundant? They're the same thing. It's like saying, it's the toast time of bread. It's the same thing. Yeah, but it's required. A Foundation policy for some reason. Fair enough. Eventually, as we were watching over the road, we saw it. A bright light shining above the skylight. I tell Chris, I didn't think airplanes flew over here. Chris replies, first, they do, rarely, but they do. And secondly, those aren't airplanes. Notice how they're still. I look once again and sure enough, the light was still. And suddenly there was two. Don't look into them for too long. That's an invitation. For what? Well, you get boarded on an alien spacecraft, only for them to experiment on you, and place some sort of chip and vaccine in you. They say it's immunity from the great disease or some crap. We know this because of the subjects brave enough to go through with the trial. I asked, and just out of curiousness, what happened to the subjects afterward? He then leans over and whispers, they supposedly retire with a good financial reward, enough that they wouldn't have to work again. Granted, they sign a license saying they'll keep mom. He then leans over and whispers, at least that's what I've heard, but I've had my doubts. I nod slowly, wondering more and more about this facility and what it has to hold. Story 9, The Foundation, an Investigation. So, ever since I've heard that, I've been more and more invested in figuring out the going-ons of the facility. I've been planning a little sneak-in, alongside a friend of mine. So you're sure it's today? Sheila asked. For sure. I replied as we head on over to the party store. If we're gonna enter the facility, we're gonna need a disguise. When we were shopping for lab coats, I looked to Sheila. So, if you didn't have a job at the Foundation, where would you be? She replied, whispering back. Don't know. I got looped up in the Foundation stuff because I was curious about the happenings of Harmony Way. After all, my dad was a Harmony Splunker. In case you don't know, a Harmony Splunker is somebody who frequents Harmony Way in order to figure out the mysteries behind it. She continued, but one day, he just didn't come back. No wreckage, nothing. Just gone ever since. I wanted to figure out what had happened. I asked her, what do you think it was? I saw her tear up. If you don't want to answer, you don't need to. I added. No, it's fine. It's just Harmony Way isn't the only mysterious factor in the area, and certainly not the only sinister one. I asked, what's the other? She replied, what I think? Don't tell anybody that I said this, but I personally think he was caught by the Foundation. That's why you're doing this, isn't it? You want to know what happened to your father. She nodded slowly. Changing the subject, I asked, if you had a kid, what would you name it? Sheila looked up. I've always wanted a daughter named Cecil. I smiled and I nodded. Cecil. That's a beautiful name. After we got our disguises, I start to drive to the entrance of the facility, but she comments that we're supposed to go the opposite way than usual, pretty much behind Harmony Way. Once we got there, she pointed out the secret entrance inside of Sandy Hill. We both went in with our disguises on. The first thing we saw was a large room with a door to an elevator. Above was a display that read out the latest news and incidents. Basically, they were about incidents that I had never heard of. G, H, and I all the way down to Z and A. Whatever those were. Anyway, there was nothing on Sarah, not even Sheila knew what they were. So we went down to the elevator. There was a slot for a key and the buttons for each doors weren't lit up. We tried pressing them, but it was no use. It seems like I need some kind of key, I muttered. She remarks, maybe we can find a key from one of the officers. I nodded and I realized to myself, that's why there weren't any security at the front. If you don't have a key, you're not going anywhere anyways. And that can show everybody the news since nobody's going to understand anyway. Hell, I'm an officer and I only know up to E. I'm an employee of this place and I know up to E and then G and H. G and H. G class are incidents relating to experiments as to whenever they succeed or not. H class is whatever my dad was. Your dad, what did he say about it? He didn't know. All he said was that he was an H class personnel, and he didn't tell me what it was. So he worked there. I think. Be right back. I went and asked one of the scientists that I needed something. Sure, man, but I'm just an intern. Only access levels I got are 1 and 2. You know they need to know basis of this place. Yeah, it's just a question. I pulled him outside and I knocked him out. I took the key from his pocket and I went back to the elevator. I put in the key and sure enough, the buttons for 1 and 2 lit up. I've been on one before, my first day. It's just paperwork and applications. Try 2. I press 2 and we go down to the floor. It's a subject training academy, as the sign says. These aren't where the subjects are. There was a large sign that said, 5-minute break. Thus, the subjects were all in the court. I turned to Sheila. We can interrogate them. How? I reply. I'm a police officer, it's kind of my thing. I went up to one of the subjects and I asked, hey, how did you get here? The subject wearing a white mask with a smiley face looked at me. With a distorted voice, he replied, you see,